Chapter 7 English Discoveries and Settlements Continued. The 10th of April, 1606, was a great day in the history of the New World. On that day, King James I issued 2 patents to men of his kingdom, authorizing them to colonize all that portion of North America lying between the 34th and 45th parallels of latitude. The immense tract extended from the mouth of Cape Fear River to Passamaquoddy Bay and westward to the Pacific Ocean. The first of these patents was granted to an association of nobles, gentlemen, and merchants called the London Company, while the second was issued to a similar body organized at Plymouth and bearing the name of the Plymouth Company. To the former corporation was given the region between the 34th and 38th degrees of latitude, and to the latter the tract from the 41st to the 45th degree. The belt of 3 degrees between the 38th and 41st parallels was to be open to colonies of either company, but no settlement of one party was to be made within less than 100 miles of the nearest settlement of another. The nature and extent of these grants will be fully understood from examination of the accompanying map. Only the London Company was successful in establishing an American colony. The leading man in the London Company was Bartholomew Gosnold. His principal associates were Edward Winkfield, a rich merchant, Robert Hunt, a clergyman, and John Smith, an adventurer. Sir John Popham, Chief Justice of England, Richard Hakluyt, a historian, and Sir Ferdinand Georges, a nobleman, were also members. The affairs of the company were to be administered by a superior council residing in England and an inferior council residing in the colony. All legislative authority was vested in the king. In the organization of the companies, no principle of self-government were admitted. A foolish provision in the patent required the proposed colony to hold all property in common for 5 years. The best law of the charter allowed the immigrants to retain in the New World all the rights of an Englishman. In August 1606, the Plymouth Company sent their first ship to America. In the autumn, another vessel was sent out, which remained in the country until the following spring. Encouraged by the reports which were brought back, the company in the summer of 1607 dispatched a colony of 100 persons. A settlement was begun at the mouth of the river Kennebec. A blockhouse and several cabins were built, and the place named St. George. Then the ships returned to England, leaving a colony of 45 persons. But the winter of 1607 to 1608 was very severe. Some of the settlers were starved and some were frozen. The storehouse was burned. And when summer came, the remnant escaped to England. The London Company had better fortune. A fleet of 3 vessels was fitted out under command of Christopher Newport. In December, the ships, having on board 105 colonists, among whom were Wingfield and Smith, left England. Newport foolishly took the old route by the way of the Canaries and did not reach America until April. It was the design to land on Roanoke Island, but a storm carried the ships northward into Chesapeake. Entering the bay, the vessels came to the mouth of the beautiful river, which was named in honor of King James. Proceeding upstream about 50 miles, Newport found on the northern bank of a peninsula, noted for its beauty. The ships were moored and the immigrants went on shore. Here on the 13th day of May, Old Style, in parentheses, 1607, were laid the foundations of Jamestown, the oldest English settlement in America. Meanwhile, a new impulse was given to the affairs of North Virginia by the activity of John Smith. In 1609, he left Jamestown and returned to England. There he found a partnership with 4 wealthy merchants of London to trade in furs and establish a colony within the limits of the Plymouth Grant. Two ships were freighted with goods and put under Smith's command. The summer of 1614 was spent on the coast of Maine, where a traffic was carried on with the Indians. But Smith himself found nobler work to do. Beginning as far north as practicable, he explored the country and drew a map of the whole coast from the Penobscot to Cape Cod. In this map, which is a marvel of accuracy considering the circumstances under which it was made, the country was called New England. In November, the ships returned to Plymouth, taking with them the proofs of a successful voyage. In 1615, a small colony of 16 persons led by Smith, was sent out in a single ship. When nearing the American coast, they encountered a storm and were obliged to return to England. In spite of these reverses, the leader renewed the enterprise and raised another company. Part of his crew became mutinous and left him mid-ocean. His own ship was captured by a band of French pirates and himself imprisoned in the harbor of Rochelle, but he escaped in an open boat and made his way to London. He now published a description of New England and urged the Company of Plymouth to action, but the London Company was jealous of its rival and put obstacles in the way. The years 1617 and 18 were spent in making plans of colonization until finally the Plymouth Company was superseded by a new corporation called the Council of Plymouth. On this body were conferred almost unlimited powers and privileges. All that part of America lying between the 40th and 48th parallels of north latitude and extending from ocean to ocean was given in fee simple to the 40 men who composed the council. More than 1 million of square miles were embraced in the grant. John Smith was now appointed Admiral of New England. The king issued a proclamation enforcing the charter, and everything gave promise of the early settlement of America. Such were the schemes of men to people the Western continent. Meanwhile, a power above the will of man was working out the same result. The time had come when, without the knowledge or consent of James I or the Council of Plymouth, a permanent settlement should be made on the shores of New England. About the close of the 16th century, a number of poor Puritans scattered through the north of England, joined themselves together for free religious worship. They believed that every man has a right to know the truth of the scriptures for himself. Such a doctrine was repugnant to the Church of England. Queen Elizabeth declared such teaching to be subversive of the monarchy. King James was also intolerant, and from time to time violent persecutions broke out against the feeble and dispersed Christians. Many of the Puritans left England and went into exile in Holland. In 1608, their ship brought them in safety to Amsterdam, where under the care of their pastor John Robinson they passed one winter, and then removed to Leyden. They took the name of pilgrims and grew content to have no home or resting place. But they did not forget their native land. During their 10 years of residence at Leyden, they longed to return to their country. The strange language of the Dutch sounded harshly to them. They pined with unrest and were anxious to do something to convince King James of their patriotism. In 1617, the Puritans began to meditate a removal to the New World. There, they would forget the past and be at peace with their country. John Carver and Robert Cushman were dispatched to England to ask permission to settle in America. The agents of the Council of Plymouth favored the request, but the king refused. The most that he would do was to make a promise to let the Pilgrims alone in America. The Puritans were not discouraged. Out of their own resources, they provided the means of departure and set their faces towards the sea. The Speedwell, a small vessel, was purchased at Amsterdam, and the Mayflower, a larger ship, was hired for the voyage. The former was to carry the immigrants to Leyden, from Leyden to Southampton, where they were to be joined by the Mayflower with another company from London. Assembling at the harbor of Delft on the river Meuse, as many of the pilgrims as could be accommodated went on board the Speedwell. The whole congregation accompanied them to the shore. There Robinson gave them a farewell address, and the prayers of those who were left behind found the vessel out of sight. On the 5th of August, 1620, the vessels left the harbor of Southampton But in a few days, the speedwell was found to be shattered and leaky. Both ships anchored at Dartmouth, and 8 days were spent in making repairs. Again, the sails were set, but the speedwell was unable to breast the ocean and put back to Plymouth. Here the ship was abandoned, but the Pilgrims were encouraged by the citizens, and the more zealous went on board the Mayflower for a final effort. On the 6th of September, the first colony of New England, numbering 102 souls, saw the shores of Old England sink behind the sea. For 63 days, the ship was buffeted by storms. It had been the intention of the Pilgrims to found their colony on the Hudson, but the tempest carried them northward to Cape Cod. On the 9th of November, the vessel was anchored in the bay. A meeting was held, and the colony organized under a solemn compact. In the charter which they there made for themselves, the emigrants declared their loyalty to the English king and agreed to live in peace and harmony. Such was the simple constitution of the oldest New England state. To this instrument, all the heads of families, 41 in number, set their names. An election was held in which all had an equal voice, and John Carver was chosen governor. Miles Standish, John Bradford, and a few others went on shore and explored the country. Nothing was found but a heap of Indian corn under the snow. On the 6th of December, the governor landed with 15 companions. The weather was dreadful. Rains and snowstorms covered the clothes of the Pilgrims with ice. They were attacked by the Indians, but escaped to the ship with their lives. The vessel was steered to the southwest for 45 miles and at last driven by accident into a haven on the west side of the bay. The next day, being the Sabbath, was spent in religious services, and on Monday, the 11th of December, old style in parentheses, 1620, the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock. It was the dead of winter. The houseless immigrants fell a-dying of hunger and cold. After a few days spent in exploration, a site was selected near the first landing. The snowdrifts were cleared away, and on the 9th of January, the toilers began to build New Plymouth. Every man took on himself the work of making his own house. But the ravages of disease grew daily worse. Lung fevers wasted every family. At one time, only 7 men were able to work on the sheds, which were built for protection. If an early spring had not brought relief, the colony must have perished. Such were the sufferings and sorrows of that winter when New England began to be. Recapitulation. King James issues patents to the London and Plymouth companies. The London Company to plant colonies between the 34th and 38th parallels. The Plymouth Company to make settlements from the 41st to the 45th degree. Gosnold, Smith, Hakluyt, and Wingfield the leaders. No democratic principles in the charter. A ship is sent out by the Plymouth Company. A second vessel dispatched to America. A settlement is attempted on the Kennebec, is abandoned. A fleet is sent out by the London Company, arrives in Chesapeake. Jamestown is founded. The Plymouth Company revived by Smith. He explores the maps of New England. Attempts are made to form a colony. The Plymouth Company is superseded by the Council of Plymouth. A new plan of colonization is made. Smith appointed admiral. The Puritans in England, they removed to Amsterdam and Leyden, determined to remove to America, ask permission, meet with discouragements, procure 2 vessels, sail from Leyden and afterward from Southampton. The Speedwell is found unfit for voyage. The Pilgrims depart in the Mayflower. A stormy voyage. Cape Cod is reached. The frame of government. Carver is elected governor. The landing is delayed. The ship driven by storms. Enters Plymouth Harbor. The Puritans on shore begin to build. Attacked with diseases. Many die, and early spring brings relief.